you know what, I'm not going to argue with the guy that throws for 4 touchdowns. My bonus performance takeaways from yesterday's game, I'm looking at giving the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's continued to just be on a tear, leading the team in rushing with 68 yards and then contributing another 116 yards in the receiving category, and then ultimately 2 scores. I mean, this guy has been on fire. He's continued to really put everyone on notice and alert that he is saying that no matter what you may think of him, he feels he's a number 1 guy. He's a number 1 wide receiver for the NFL, and teams are going to have to contend with that. The other performance was Jared Goff. I know many of you may disagree with that in some fashion, but you know what? I'm not going to argue with the guy that throws for 4 touchdowns, 256 yards, and he goes 20 of 34, 121.7 QB rating. Jared Goff played what I thought was probably his most polished game as a Detroit Lion, and also I saw him take finally command of this offensive unit, which has been missing, and you want to see that type of leadership when you talk in terms of your quarterback. So to Jared Goff, I also show that he is one of those guys that I'm giving my bonus check to. On the defensive side, it was Aiden Hutchinson. Hey, multiple sack game, the guy that's coming in, high expectations, the pressure's on him. He's playing in front of basically a home crowd, and he goes out and he performs, and you can see that the team and his teammates were very excited about him, but he rounds out an entire unit, and he doesn't play as just an individual. And then the final one is the defensive backs, who I thought were really the biggest contributing factor to really make this team go. They played excellent coverage on the outside and man-to-man coverage, with the exception of the third quarter when they allowed Washington to get back into it. But outside of that, I think they were the ones that allowed the defensive front, down linemen, and also the edge rushers to be effective in the fact that they were able to disrupt the receiving routes and the passing routes and timing between quarterback and wide receivers, which meant the quarterback had to either hold the ball a little bit longer or he had to reset the pocket. And therefore, that led to them being much more effective defensively than what we've seen. But I see and I expect to see more of that being dialed up as confidence grows. I'm not sure about 2 players, DJ Chark, TJ Hockenson. Seems that those guys are disappearing a little bit. TJ Hockenson has to be more of a focus. He has to be more involved. You have to make sure you're feeding him on a consistent basis each quarter. We made it when I played. There were certain players you made sure they had touches or attempts every single quarter. That's got to happen. My fear is that if you continue to look at one player or you overload it to one place and you don't keep the balance, not just run game, pass game, but within your unit, then you ultimately set yourself up to be easily shut down. And you can't just all of a sudden out of the blue just start think players are going to make plays if they haven't been involved throughout a game or throughout the season. DJ Chark is one of those players that's probably most concerning, because he's a guy that was brought in to make big plays, to be your red zone threat, and also to create matchups, problems for your opponent. I don't see that happening. I don't think he's being targeted enough, and if he is, it's being targeted the wrong way. You got to get him underneath. You got to throw him a slant route, even if he's in bump coverage or man coverage. You got to be able to put him in position to make plays to show that he has that value to be able to beat coverage. If you don't, it can't be, we're just going to take a shot now that we're in the red zone, but he hasn't seen any passes all day. That's tough sometimes in the psyche of a player. So that if I'm looking at the Lions right now, I'm going, if you want to get those 2 players, which I think rounds out your offense, because you can see that you still have a very good offensive unit, absent a few of your starting linemen, you don't lose anything there for the most part, at least against the Commanders. The receiving unit is good, but it's not diverse enough to give you threats all across the board. But ultimately, the coaching staff grew, the confidence of the coaching staff grew, the validation of the fact that their players can trust them and that they can trust the players. The fact that this is a offensive and defensive and special teams game, all 3 phases played well. The coaching staff have done what most teams struggle to do and new head coaches do, and that is develop talent. Coach Dan Campbell and his team have figured out a way to develop this talent and expedite it. Last year, they were somewhat of a joke in the NFL. No offensive output. You're really concerned. You got an injured offensive line. You have a defensive unit that is playing, pretty much solid football protecting its offense. It's like the big brother protecting the little brother. And then you got Jared Goff really looking for answers and anyone to throw the football to make plays. And then you get the emergence of Josh Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown at the end of the season. And all of a sudden it carries over, and those players are even better. So now you have a full, complete football team. You have an open playbook. You have the ability to be on the attack offensively, defensively. That's what you have now with the Detroit Lions. And the last thing that I saw as a takeaway from this is, where did they win? They grew in confidence. It was more than just the individual. It was more about the unit. We'll hear about the individual players offensively. We'll hear about the individual players and what they need to be doing defensively. But ultimately, they are looking to say, how do we get better as a unit? And then how do we win and get better as a team, as a collective? And what we saw and what we're seeing, the Detroit Lions are doing that. And they're doing that with confidence. There's a couple of concerns that I take away. One is they can't have lapses when you're down and you have your opponent down 22 points at home, halftime, and then you let them back into the game. You can't have lapses on offense and defense like that. You can't get into lapses of 3 and out. And you can't sustain drives. 4 of 13 on third down, got to be better. You got to be more efficient. You got to have better results there. But I see discipline coming out of this. This is a team that is making less mistakes. They have started to really go and not have the turnovers offensively. Defensively, they got to have more takeaways, but they're not giving up the big plays as much. You also see the penalties are down. When you have the penalties start to fall in a game like this, you've made progress. You made progress. So I see this as being really a team that is on the verge of really taking it to the next level. What does that mean? I think it starts with the NFC North. You know, they're going to have Minnesota coming in their third straight game. This is a third straight game at home. Now it's an opportunity for them to get a start on what is the NFC North going to look like and what that challenge. They've been in the NFC East, taking on 2 opponents there, and now it's time to come to their division.
Perfect.